Hello again, gamers. Welcome back for another episode of Grokking Battletech. I'm the board game captain, and today I'm going to be telling you how to grok the Stalker. So first, I'm going to give a big thank you to one of my regular viewers, Luke Dudley, who requested that I cover the Stalker in an episode of Grokking Battletech. So Luke Dudley, this episode is for you. So before I get too into this, I do want to say I've got a ton of links in the description down below that you can check out at your leisure. There's a link to BoardGameCaptain.com, which is a great hub for all things Board Game Captain. There's also a link to my Teespring store if you'd like to get yourself some cool Board Game Captain merch, t-shirts, mugs, etc. And there's a link to my Patreon if you're in a position to and would like to support the channel. Head over to my Patreon, link in the description down below. All right, so the Stalker. The Stalker is one of the big old school mechs that's been around since the Succession Wars, really since the Star League. This is supposedly, according to the canon, I believe it is the most common assault mech in all factions in the Inner Sphere. That said, it is a big, generally missile boat, lots of different weapons. There are a bunch of different variants. It is one of the not humanoid looking mechs, which are generally my favorite. It's got a pair of legs that, depending on the artwork, either have regular or digitigrade knee joints and nothing really in the way of arms. It's just sort of like a body on a pair of legs, which is really kind of cool. I do like the look of the Stalker. All right, so we're gonna talk about this big lumbering 85-ton beast, and in one weird case, 75-ton, but we'll get to that in a minute. And most of the canon variants. Then after going over all of that, I'm gonna give you a custom version made by my own personal mech design firm, KIWF. I'm also going to recommend you a mech warrior to put in the cockpit of my favorite version of the Stalker. And I'm also going to give you a lance made with my favorite canon version of the Stalker for the Succession War time period, because I felt like I hadn't done enough Succession War era mech lances. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So the first Stalker I want to discuss is the STK-3F. Now the STK-3F is generally considered to be the default version of the Stalker. This is a Star League era version of the Stalker. It is 3-5 movement. It has a really decent amount of armor for a mech of that time period, with the full 9 armor on the head, 36 on the center torso, 25 on the side torsos, 23 on the arms, 25 on the legs, and 11 and 7 on the rear torso sections, respectively. Now, this mech comes with 20 single heat sinks, which is where trouble comes into paradise. Now, the 3-5 movement, that's slow for a mech, but pretty normal for an assault mech, especially of the Succession Wars. But the 20 single heat sinks, this is something that's just not acceptable for the amount of heat that the weapons on this mech cause. So its armament sounds really good until you count up all the heat. Let's talk about the armament a little bit, and I'm going to come back to the 20 single heat sinks in a moment. So armament, we've got 2 large lasers, 2 SRM-6s, 2 LRM-10s, and 4 medium lasers. Now you might be thinking, oh, this sounds great. That's a lot of firepower. If you add up the heat, we are talking about 45 heat if you alpha strike. 20 single heat sinks means, and think about this for a minute, you will overheat by 25 points if you alpha strike and walk. That's terrible. That's insane. You can never fire all of these at once. Now you might be thinking, oh, but you know, you're going to cycle them. There's going to be some you're not going to fire when you're at medium to close range. And sure, you know, those LRM-10s, they have minimum ranges. The LRM-10s only count for 8 of that heat. The large lasers doing 16 of the heat is by far, of any of the groups of weapons, the largest amount of heat. And they have no minimum range. You're going to still want to fire your large lasers at short range. Yeah, this is a very poorly designed mech. The basic version of the Stalker is not one I would ever take. However, and this is a kind of night and day situation, we move on to the very first variant of the Stalker, the STK-3H, and what we find is this other Star League era version of the Stalker is severely redeemed for the Stalker, in my opinion, because this is one of, if not my very favorite version of the Stalker. absolutely adore it. In the Star League era, this is the one I would always take. So the Stalker, STK3H. We still have the 3-5 movement. We still have the same armor, the 36 on the center torso, 25 on the sides, 23 on the arms, 25 on the legs, full 9 on the head, 11 and 7 on the rear torso sections, respectively. We still have the 20 single heat sinks. But where this mech shines is in its smarter weapon loadout for the Stalker chassis. So we still have the 2 SRM6s. We still have the 4 medium lasers. But everything else, the LRM-10s, the large lasers, they're gone. Instead, we got a pair of LRM-20s. Now, this really brings the heat down to a much more manageable level. Now, we're talking about only 26 heat, 27 if you walk. With the 20 single heat sinks, you can alpha strike and you will overheat, but not to a severe degree. This is actually doable. If you get to that nice kind of medium to short range area, short range for the LRM 20s, but not within their minimum range, or maybe just within their minimum range, I kind of feel like basically 6 hexes from your target, where you're 1 point within the minimum range of the LRM-20s, but you're at medium range for the SRM-6s, and you might want to alpha strike, you can alpha strike. Then on the next turn, you're going to need to not fire some things, like maybe some of the medium lasers, because they are proportionately cause the most heat, 12 heat from the 4 medium lasers, to cool off a little bit, but it's still doable to maybe once every other turn alpha strike with this thing if you can maintain that kind of 6 hexes away from your opponent. The STK3H is a phenomenal assault mech for the Succession War time period, and this is one I would definitely recommend taking. Next, we have a Succession War era version of the Stalker called the STK4N. Now, this version is, it's an attempt to try to do a version of the original version of the Stalker with better heat sinking capacity. So the thing is, all right, the armor stays pretty similar, but a little altered from the original version. We've got 36 on the center torso, 25 on the side torsos, 22 on the arms, 29 on the legs, 9 and 5 on the rear torso sections, respectively, full 9 on the head. We upped the heat sinking capacity to 26 single heat sinks. It's still got the 3-5 movement, but the issue here is it's still got a lot of those very heat-intensive weapons. We still have the 2 large lasers, the 2 SRM-6s. We only have 1 LRM-10, probably dropped to make room for those heat sinks, and we have 4 medium lasers. Now, this will not overheat as severely because of the reduction of the 1 LRM-10 and the increase of the heat sinks, being able to sink 6 more heat, but it still has a severe heat problem, one that is so bad I still can't recommend using it over the 3H. I think the 3H is still by far the better version of the Stalker here. Now, the next version of the Stalker, another Succession War era version, is the 4P. P is in Papa. So this one, again, slight modifications to the armor here. We've got 35 on the center torso, 25 on the sides, 23 on the arms, 26 on the legs, 10 and 7 on the rear torso sections, respectively. Full 7 on the head. We still have that 3-5 movement that's pretty standard for Stalkers. We have the 20 single heat sinks, but this one's kind of weird. So the 4P is a downgrade in weight. We are only a 75-ton mech here. Now this one is really odd. It's basically attempting to turn the Stalker into a heavy rather than an assault mech and try to kind of do what the Stalker, the regular Stalker already did, but as a heavy mech. And I mean, this does also reduce the battle value a bit, but the thing is, again, severe overheating problem. We've still got the 2 large lasers, 2 SRM-6s, 1 LRM-10, and 4 medium lasers. Again, this is a mech that is going to ludicrously overheat if you alpha strike with it. And generally speaking, is, in my opinion, not really worth the downgrade in weight when you have to go back to those original 20 heat sinks with almost the full heat from the original Stalker. Really, again, just down 1 LRM-10. But otherwise, basically, you're going to be overheating about 21 points of heat if you alpha strike and walk with this thing, which is really not acceptable, in my opinion. And that's going to take us out of the Star League and Succession War era versions of the Stalker. So let's move into the later era versions of the Stalker with the reintroduction of better equipment. So first, we're going to talk about the STK 5M. So this is a upgrade of the Stalker with double heat sinks. We've still got the 3-5 movement. We've still got very similar armor. They all fluctuate around those same kind of armor areas. We've got 36 on the center torso, 27 on the sides, 25 on the arms, 27 on the legs, 11 and 9 on the rear torso sections respectively, and full 9 on the head. Now this one though, it has 17 double heat sinks. This goes a long way to making this mech a much more heat efficient mech. You've got 34 points of heat sinking capacity, which is fantastic. And it's going to need it because this thing comes with an ER large laser, 2 SRM6s, 2 LRM10s, 4 medium lasers, and a NARC launcher. Now, again, that ER large laser is a very heat intensive weapon with causing 12 heat. But you know what, this is a very interesting version of the mech because of the NARC launcher. You can have NARC equipped ammo for your SRM6s, which it by default comes with, as well as NARC equipped ammo for your LRM10s. So you can peg someone with the NARC and then use it for all of your missiles to up the amount of missiles that will hit the target. This very much feels like a proper upgrade of the original Succession War version of the Stalker into the Clan Invasion era with some of the reintroduced tech. So overall, I would say that the 5M is not bad. I like it, but it is also kind of underwhelming. The only big change in regard to the weapons are you know, you got an ER large laser and a NARC launcher. So other than that, mostly it stays the same as really the original version there. Now the next version of the Stalker is a Stalker that, yeah, falls victim to what has been my biggest problem with most of the versions of the Stalker so far. It overheats, and it overheats terribly. This is the 5S, the STK 5S. So for some reason, even though this Stalker is made after the discovery of the Helm memory core, it still only has 20 single heat sinks. What were they thinking when they were going to actually increase the heat being put out by this mech? So you've got the 3-5 movement, you got the 36 armor on the center torso, 25 on the sides, 23 in the arms, 25 on the legs, 11 and 7 on the rear torso sections respectively, full 9 on the head. But for the weapons, we have 2 large pulse lasers, 2 SRM6s, 2 LRM10s, 4 medium lasers, and an anti-missile system. So here's the thing. This mech has a worse overheating problem than the very basic version of the Stalker that I already said had one of the worst overheating problems of any mech in the game. This takes that and makes it even worse. This is one of the worst designed mechs to make it to production ever, because there's no way you're going to be firing even a decent portion of these weapons. If you fire both large pulse lasers and walk, just 2 large pulse lasers, and walk, you overheat 1 point. This mech is just a nightmare to pilot because you're going to cook in your own cockpit. Yeah, I cannot recommend that version of the Stalker at all. The next version we're going to talk about is the STK 6M, which thankfully is a double heatsink version because, by God, if you make it to the Clan Invasion era time period and you're designing and manufacturing Stalkers, give it double heat sinks. Why would you not do that? So this one also is a bit up armored, which I like. Improvement in armor is always good. So we've got the standard 3-5 movement. We've got 40 armor on the center torso, 27 on the side torsos, 28 on the arms, 36 on the legs, full 9 on the head, 14 and 9 on the rear torso sections, respectively, which is really decent. We have 18 double heat sinks for a total of 36 heat sinking capacity. And then for the weapons, we have, and follow me close here because there's a lot. We have an ER large laser. We have 5, count them, 5 ER medium lasers. We have 2 LRM-15s with Artemis 4 fire control systems. So this is a very interesting redesign of the Stalker. It does still have a heat problem, but not as bad as some of its predecessors. Full walking and firing, alpha striking, of firing every weapon. Will cause, I believe, about 12 heat on the heat scale, if I'm not mistaken. That's not great. 12 heat is significant, but it's not the unbelievably terrible 25 heat or even more of a couple of the previous versions. This one actually, it feels like you can alpha strike once, maybe twice in a game. Of course, you're gonna have to pull back and not fire a lot of those laser weapons. Maybe just fire the LM-15s to cool down a turn after you alpha strike, but it is possible. You could do it in the game. That said, this is a really good Civil War era version of the Stalker, and one I would recommend, especially if you're able to cycle weapons, like when you get close, maybe not fire the two LRM-15s while you fire off all of the laser weapons, would make it not overheat that much, because that is 10 heat off of the scale. And again, it only overheats about 12. So if you drop the two LRM-15s while you're firing all the laser weapons, you're only going to overheat 2. That's not bad at all. And then you could just, not fire an ER medium laser for a turn. But yeah, so this version is actually quite good. Next, we have another Civil War era version of the Stalker, also designed by an idiot who learned nothing from all of the overheating earlier time period variants of the Stalker. This is the STK-7D. Again, this is a mech where they put way too much high heat causing weapons on a chassis that really did not have the heat sinking capacity to handle it all. So this, again, like a lot of the other versions of the Stalker, we have the 3-5 movement. We've got the 36 armor on the center torso, 25 on the sides, 23 on the arms, 25 on the legs, 9 on the head, 11 and 7 on the rear torso sections, respectively. I do have to say that by the time you get to the Civil War, really, this armor is far less impressive. They really should have dropped some of these weapons to increase the armor some more, especially because these weapons are going to ludicrously overheat you. Now, it has 18 double heat sinks. That's 36 heat sinking capacity. And that seems like a lot until you notice that its main armament is 2 ERPPCs. 15 heat each, that's 30 heat. Now, if you're walking, that's 31 heat. You've got 5 heat left before you're overheating. So what else does this have? In addition to the 2 ERPPCs, we have a small laser. We have 4 medium pulse lasers. We have 2 Streak SRM-4s and a targeting computer. Now, the targeting computer is nice, but again, this is something that can really fire everything at very short range. There's nothing with a minimum range in here, thanks to the fact that not PPCs, but ERPPCs were loaded on this. And if you fire everything at point blank range with this puppy, we're talking about 53 heat when it can only absorb 36. I think you can see where I'm going with this. Do not field this version of the Stalker. It is not worth the battle value, because generally speaking, since you're only going to reliably be able to fire the ERPPCs and nothing else, while so that don't overheat, or maybe everything else but not the ERPPCs, you might as well just take a Warhammer or, a Marauder. Generally speaking, I think they would actually perform better than this version of the Stalker on the battlefield. Not a fan of this one. Now, the next one I like. This is the STK-8S. It's another Civil War era version of the Stalker. I like it because they tried to do something very different with the Stalker, which is something that I think sadly has been mostly missing in most versions of the Stalker. Many of them feel very similar to one another. There haven't been enough designs that really tried to take the Stalker outside of the box in regard to what Stalkers do, but this one does. That said, there are some issues with it. I'm going to talk about it. So first off, the Stalker STK-8S is a 3-5 movement like most of the Stalkers. We have 36 armor on the center torso, 25 on the sides, 23 on the arms, 25 on the legs, 11 and 7 on the rear torso section respectively, which is basically what we've been seeing for a lot of the recent variants I've been going over. Now, this version of the Stalker has 16 double heat sinks for 32 heat sinking capacity, but we switched to having, in addition to some very hot weapons, some very not very hot weapons, some weapons that are much better in regard to heat management. So its main armament is we have a heavy Gauss rifle. This thing only causes 2 heat, and while at long range it only causes 10 damage, at short range it does 25 damage. This is a weapon that really excels once you get to medium or short range, 20 damage at medium, 25 at short. In addition to that, we have 2 ERPPCs, 2 medium pulse lasers, and 2 ER medium lasers. So obviously you've got 3 armor-piercing weapons with the heavy Gauss and the 2 ERPPCs. The ERPPCs can be used at very long range. The ERPPCs and the heavy Gauss rifle, along with walking, will only overheat this mech 1 point. And then you have, when you want to do some crit seeking, you have the medium pulse lasers and the ER medium lasers. You are going to need to cycle some weapons here, but it is still significantly more heat efficient than a lot of the previous versions because of switching its main armament over to a Gauss weapon, which Gauss weapons are all generally much more heat efficient. I do very much like this version of the Stalker. But there are some issues with it. Now, this version can perform fairly well against other inner sphere enemies, but there are a lot of problems when you try to fight against the clans with this because it is fairly slow. That heavy Gauss rifle needs to get fairly close to do its damage. At a distance, you're really still just pegging enemies with 2 ERPPCs, which at that point, there's some variants of the Warhammer or Marauder I could introduce you to that could kind of do this job better. Once you get close, that heavy Gauss rifle is going to tear giant holes in your enemy, and then the crit-seeking medium pulse laser and ER medium lasers can find those holes. But again, this is one I would really only take against enemy inner sphere enemies rather than clan enemies. That said, I do like this version. If facing the clans, you're going to want to hide it behind a lot of hills until you can get a lot closer and get to, around 13 hexes from your enemy to start hitting with the 20 damage with the heavy Gauss rifle. But it does have the issue of really still having armor that's roughly on par with the Succession War era versions of the Stalker. So if your enemy's able to zero in on you with some longer range weapons like clan large pulse lasers, clan ERPPCs that can pierce you at a distance, you're really going to get torn up before you even get into decent range with that heavy Gauss rifle. So I can recommend this one, but situationally, depending on your enemy and depending on the terrain. Clan, if there's a lot of buildings or giant hills to hide behind. Inner sphere in other situations because the inner sphere doesn't have as many really amazingly long-range weapons like the clan does. Now, the next version of the Stalker I'm going to talk about is a clan tech version of the Stalker. This is the Stalker STK3F Jameson. So it is a clan version, so of course it's going to have better tech. We up-armored it a little bit. It's still the 3-5 movement. We've got 40 armor on the center torso, 28 on the sides, 28 on the arms, 35 on the legs, full 9 on the head, 14 and 7 on the rear torso sections respectively. This thing comes with 18 clan double heat sinks for 36 heat sink capacity. We have 2 large pulse lasers, 2 Streak SRM6s, 2 LRM20s, and 4 ER medium lasers. So believe it or not, this thing still can have a little bit of a heat sinking issue even with clan tech. But that said, it basically does the job of what the standard versions of the Stalker do, but better with the more advanced technology of the clans. That said, if you're playing clans, you're probably going to be taking one of the better clan mechs, like say, a Mad Cat, rather than taking this thing, which actually costs you 2,707 battle value, which is a lot to put into this when there are mechs with similar battle value that can do this job actually better within the clans. So it's definitely better than any of the Inner Sphere versions, and I could see myself actually using this in an Inner Sphere force and saying that they had purchased a clan tech version of the Stalker for use from like Clan Diamond Shark or something, but as playing as a clan player, actually significantly less likely that I would field this as a clan player. Now, the final version of the Stalker I'm going to briefly touch upon is the STK 7C3BS. This is an experimental Jihad era version of the Stalker, which again, it doesn't veer very far from the standard mold that most Stalkers fit into. We got the 85-ton chassis, 3-5 movement, 36 armor on the center torso, 25 on the sides, 23 on the arms, 25 on the legs, 9 on the head, 11 and 7 on the rear torso sections respectively. We got 18 double heat sinks to keep it cool. It's got 2 multi-missile launcher 5s. It's got 4 medium pulse lasers, a C3 boosted slave computer, a small VSP laser. This is, a decent amount of firepower, but the missiles are significantly reduced in number thanks to the multi-missile launcher 5s. I do like the large amount of pulse weapons. It also has an ER PPC for, again, a little bit of that, long-range armor piercing. But by the time you get to the Jihad era, generally speaking, this mech is feeling so similar to a lot of the older versions of the Stalker that it's feeling really under-armored and under-gunned for this time period. So yeah, generally speaking, I don't think I would take this. Now, I want to go backwards a little bit. I want to go back to my favorite version of the Stalker, because my favorite version is the one that I feel does the best for its time period. And again, that is the 3H. Now the 3H, again, if you recall, was the one with 2 SRM-6s, 2 LRM-10s, 4 medium lasers on a Star League era chassis, 20 single heat sinks, but it is one of the more heat efficient versions of the Stalker, even comparing it to later time period versions. And actually in the Succession War time period, this level of firepower and this level of armor is really decent, and having 2 tons of SRM ammo means you can swap out 1 of the tons of SRM ammo with Inferno rounds, and while you're slowly marching in on your enemy with withering amounts of firepower from those LRMs, you eventually get close enough to cause heat spikes in enemies in the Succession War time period, where already many enemies have heat issues. You come in on an enemy like, say, a Guillotine or an Awesome who's already, heating up a little bit, and you blast them with this and make them jump up to like 15 on the heat scale, which is the max amount of external heat, of course, you can cause to an enemy, and this could be absolutely brilliant. So I'm going to go with this mech for starting with my custom version, as well as using this mech in my Lance, and this mech for which mech warrior I want to put in it. So let's start with my custom version. So what I decided to do was I wanted to make a clan invasion version of the 3H. I really like the 3H for the Succession War era, but I felt like none of the clan invasion upgrades really did what I would have done with upgrading this version with the tech from the Helm Memory Core. So this is a refit designed by my own personal mech design firm, KIWF, named after the last initials of its 4 founding members, but affectionately nicknamed Kill It With Fire by its fans. So this is the Stalker STK3HKIWF, and this is meant to be a Helm Memory Core tech upgrade of the 3H for the clan invasion era. So the first thing I did with this version is I wanted to free up some weight and improve the heatsink capacity even a little more, as well as give it a little bit more armor and give it quite a bit more firepower. So the first thing I did was I switched to double heat sinks, because you have to have double heat sinks. I also upped the number I actually reduced the number of heat sinks while upping the amount of heat sinking capacity by giving it 11 double heat sinks. So this thing goes to now being able to sink 22 heat. From 20, it's a small upgrade from 20 heat to 22 heat, but it is also a big upgrade in reducing the weight on the mech to be able to fit other things in. I also gave it an extra light fusion engine, again, to free up a ton of weight. Now, this does add a lot of vulnerability to my version, but that also helps to keep the battle value down, so you can fit this in some lances with some other fairly sizable mechs. Now, I added on half a ton of armor just to increase the armor a little bit to slightly counterbalance, all of the extra vulnerability from having a lot of ammo in a mech with extra light fusion engines. So it's got 40 on the center torso, 26 on the sides, 23 on the arms, 26 on the legs, and 11 and 7 on the rear torso sections respectively. Of course, full 9 on the head. It's still 3-5 movement, but for the weapons, here's what I did. It still got the 2 LRM-20s. It's still got the 2 SRM-6s. I took off 2 medium lasers though, and that combined with the weight savings from the extra light engine and the double heat sinks allowed me to fit on a Gauss rifle and 2 tons of ammo. I then moved around things a little bit, put 2 SRM-6s on the left torso so I could also put the ammo in there to mix them in with a lot of other targets to make it less likely for that ammo to explode. I also intend to make one of these tons of ammo, of course, Inferno rounds to help overheat the enemy, and I put the Gauss rifle and its 2 tons of ammo in the right torso. So there you have it. That is my custom version of the Stalker. I actually like this version of the Stalker best out of all versions of the Stalker. My custom version I like better than any of the canon versions. I felt like the heavy Gauss rifle on the Stalker was a cool idea, but it wasn't good enough for what the Stalker does because of how slow it is and how little armor it generally has. So instead, I really wanted a regular Gauss rifle on it because the Stalker is better at slowly marching towards your enemy with very long-range firepower, because a lot of versions of the Stalker usually have LRM-20s or possibly ERPPCs. So the two LRM-20s in the Gauss rifle, it allows you to punch a hole with the Gauss rifle, find the hole with the LRM-20s, and then when you get closer, find the hole with the SRM-6s, or possibly cause a heat spike and cause your opponent to shut down with the Inferno rounds with the SRM-6s. So that said, like I said earlier, even though I like this version better, I do want to make a Succession War Era Lance. So I'm going to give you a Mech Warrior that I recommend for piloting the STK-3H, so I can make a Succession War Era Lance, and then I'm going to give you my 5,000 battle value Succession War Era Lance. So the Mech Warrior I recommend for piloting the STK-3H is Sarah O'Kathane. Now, Sarah O'Kathane is a 3-4 Mech Warrior, so we upgrade the gunnery and the piloting skill by 1 each. They are also a 3-cost Mech Warrior, so this is a Mech Warrior that you are going to pick if you and your opponent agree to play 3-cost Mech Warriors, and they have 2 abilities for that 3 cost. They have Sandblaster LRM, which is a great ability for the LRM-20s. The 2 LRM-20s are going to really improve the number of missiles that hit quite a bit with this ability. So the thing is, the way this works is, at long range, you get to add +2 to your cluster hits roll. At medium range, it's +3, and at short range, it's +4, which means you're guaranteeing yourself more missiles hitting the target. In addition, it has Sarah has Oblique Attacker, which says that indirect fire attacks get a -1 to hit modifier, making them 1 point easier, and do not require a spotter. So if you're hiding your Stalker on the way in behind hills, you can still hit enemies without even needing a spotter, which is pretty amazing. With those 2 LRM-20s, you can actually cripple a lighter mech if it's not moving very fast, hiding itself, with some indirect fire, which is pretty freaking awesome. I think Sarah O'Kathane is a fantastic choice for piloting the 3H. Now, what lance have I made for my STK-3H using the Force Organization construction rules from the Battletech Clan Invasion book? I decided to make a command lance. Now, the requirements of the command lance is that at least 1 unit in the formation must be designated as the commander. That will be the Stalker, because they are going to be one of the more survivable units in the formation, since they're going to slowly walk at their enemy at a fair distance. While other mechs get much closer, they're going to be a more difficult target to hit as they walk up slowly and take cover in different positions, while still having a fairly decent amount of armor for the Succession War time period. Next, 50% of the units must have one of the following roles: Sniper, Missile Boat, Skirmisher, or Juggernaut. The Stalker and one other. Stalker is a Missile Boat, and I have another one that's a Juggernaut. They fulfill those roles. 1 additional unit must be a Brawler, Striker, or Scout. I have a Striker in here, so that fulfills that. And then for the ability, you have 2 abilities given to you by Command Star. One is you get to re-roll initiative every round, which makes you far more likely to win the initiative roll than your opponent. And the other one is that you can give 2 units the ability Combat Intuition, which you have to announce at the end of one of your turns that you're going to be using it for the following turn. As long as you announce it, you take a wound. So this is where it gets a little risky, because the first time you do it, you could fall unconscious if you roll Snake Eyes. You have to check, of course, every time you take a wound on your pilot. Now, the first time is pretty safe, but the second time you have to stay conscious on a 5 or better, then a 7 or better. So doing it twice gets risky. Doing it 3 times gets incredibly risky. But it can be a very decisive and amazing ability, because then during the next round, you can allow that particular mech and Mech Warrior to do all of their moving, shooting, and close combat before another mech even gets to move, allowing you to ignore any movement modifiers from the mech. But of course, your opponent will know exactly where they are and may be able to really return fire on them very well, which again makes it a fairly risky ability. But I have had some success with it in a few games where you can really hit someone with a big gun like an autocannon 20 without any modifiers and make it very likely to hit and do a lot of damage or even possibly destroy an enemy mech. All right, so what mechs do I have in this lance to back up the Stalker in this 5,000 battle value Succession War Command Lance? So the second mech is my mech with the big gun. This is the juggernaut of the group. This is the Charger CGR-1A5. Now, this thing is a beast. You've got an 80-ton mech with 4.6 movement, which is fast for an 80-ton mech. It's going to spend most of the time running towards the enemy to close the distance because most of its weapons are very close range. We've got an autocannon 20, 2 SRM-6s, and a medium laser. Now, normally I would run this by swapping out the 1 ton of SRM ammo with Inferno rounds, but we're already going to be putting a ton of Inferno rounds in the Stalker and in one other mech in this group. So actually I'm going to keep them standard rounds to try to crit seek for that autocannon 20. It's also got decent armor at 39 on the center torso, 26 on the sides, 24 on the arms, 33 on the legs, and 10 and 8 on the rear torso sections respectively. It's not enough armor that you're going to be able to just run right down the middle. You still want to kind of offset and go towards a flank first. Take out a mech on the flank before you move in, because if your entire enemy's lance focuses fire on the Charger, you might be in trouble. So, try not to do it that way. The next mech is going to be a mech that's going to tag team with the Charger and try to overheat and then crit seek with its SRMs, and this is the Whitworth WTH-1S. This is a 40-ton mech with an okay amount of armor, a decent amount of maneuverability, and a really decent amount of firepower. So what we have here is 16 armor in the center torso, 12 on the sides, 12 on the arms, 18 on the legs, 7 and 6 on the rear torso sections respectively, on a 4-6-4 chassis. So we have 4 jumping, 6 running, really decent. We have 14 single heat sinks, and we have 2 SRM-6s and 3 medium lasers. Now with the 2 tons of SRM ammo, one of them is going to definitely be swapped out for Inferno rounds, so we can use this to overheat an enemy mech, which again, mechs are very vulnerable to overheating during the Succession War time period, and then that overheated mech is going to be obliterated by the Charger, and then maybe crits, when the Charger blows a hole in it with the autocannon 20, you're going to crit seek with all the missiles from your Stalker. Now the final mech is a mech to run around the rear and to stabilize your enemy's lines. We have the Wolfhound WLF-1A, my favorite Succession War era cannon version of the Wolfhound. We have 3 medium lasers and a large laser. We ditch the rear laser of the original Wolfhound to add on 1 more heatsink for 11 single heatsinks, which is not amazing, but it is a big improvement to the basic version of the Wolfhound, which has a really big heat problem with only the 10 heatsinks. And really, that rear medium laser is not something that's very much needed in the Wolfhound chassis. This thing has 16 armor on the center torso, 11 on the sides, 12 on the arms, 16 on the legs, 6 and 5 on the rear torso sections respectively, but 6-9 movement for fairly good maneuverability for the Succession War time period. So there you have it. That is the lance that I would make for the Stalker, and that is the episode I made for the Stalker for Grokking Battletech. Comment down below what you thought of my custom version of the Stalker or my lance. Let me know what mechs I should cover in future episodes of Grokking Battletech. And if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see me do more like it, be sure to give it a like, share it on all forms of social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on.